So this is Kat before my first proper panel. In like floating conditions.
100%.
You can have whatever you want in the pool.
Amazing.
In the pool though. Oh, come on, show the hands.
Sold.
Yes, in the pool. Love it. Thank you. Everyone here is coming to PoolCon. We will tell you when it's going to happen.
Please submit as a suggestion to Joe Please.
Hi everybody. Welcome to How to Give and Accept Feedback. My name is Nicole Amato. I'm a game designer and I'm currently the Games Outreach Lead at Kickstarter. I've brought together some incredibly talented and wonderful game designers to talk about feedback. And first thing I want to do is have you guys all introduce yourselves. Kat, do you want to start?
I guess I do. Hi, I'm Kat Drayer. I'm not from here. I'm originally from New Zealand, currently living in Portland, Oregon. Drayer Ink is the brand under which my husband George and I design our games. I also illustrate them, and I'm currently running the Unpub room here at PAX West, which is 2 floors down, room 333. Come see us and give us friendly feedback.
Or else.
Or else.
Eddie?
You also forgot to mention that you're the ideator of PoolCon. Which is to add here.
Yeah, let's add that to the resume.
Creator, president, and CEO, PoolCon.
My name is Adi Slepack. I made a game called Someone Has Died. I have a small publishing company called Gather Round Games. And we focus on making stories that are very narrative focused. So Someone Has Died is an improvisational storytelling game. And I also do graphic design. Sometimes.
Cool.
You're going to do the logo for PoolCon, I heard.
Yes, please. What a contract.
I'm Brennan. I am the owner and designer at Offcut Games, who we are showing off games this weekend down in Tabletop 89, which is the tabletop co-op booth. Eddie is also down there with us as well. Our most recent game is Co-op, which is a 2-player cooperative card game about assembling flat pack furniture in a failing relationship. And then I am also the technical director at Pace University, where I guide children through the creative process of building sets and the feedback that entails, which I think will probably come up here.
And in PoolCon.
And in PoolCon.
No.
Yeah. No.
I'm not associated with PoolCon.
Wow.
Like I said, I'm Nicole Amato. I own a company called Cardboard Fortress Games. I have 4 published games, including Laser Riders and Atari Centipede. And I have been doing this stuff for like 15 years, and I love it. And so let's hop right into feedback. I want to talk about...
Yeah, wake up your laptop.
Oh, sorry.
It is awake.
It is awake.
Oh, the screen doesn't know. Hello.
We're happy to also give you our info afterwards.
You keep doing this thing.
Thanks, Dad. I want to talk about experience giving feedback and what advice you guys would give about it. I can start because I can tell you that at first I was not very good at giving feedback. I was very nervous about giving designers bad feedback. I was nervous about giving anyone any critical or negative feedback, partly because I had imposter syndrome about being in the space, and partly because I felt like I would fall apart if anybody gave me any like criticism. So I ended up just constantly saying like, this is great, no notes. And that wasn't very productive. So I started learning how to sort of analyze and be like more critical about when I was playing the game. I would take notes, I would start thinking about what I wanted to say, and then I would sometimes, even if I was like extra anxious about it, I would sort of bring like a list of questions of things that I wanted to ask, so that way I knew like what kind of feedback I wanted to give or what kind of questions I wanted to ask. Patrick?
Is there a question in there? Sorry.
No. Oh yeah, the question.
You just want me to talk about?
Yeah, like what's been your experience giving, like when you give feedback, like what like how do you give feedback, like?
Oh sure,
and what advice would you give people about how to give feedback that's like quality and constructive?
Sure. It is sort of tailored to each person that I work with and how I do things. Like I said before, I kind of work in a university, which means that I work with a lot of fragile young adults who are just like stepping into the world for the first time, and like the skill set that I have built up there in terms of working directly with artists is exactly the same as working with tabletop creators, because everybody, especially if this is their first project, they're coming into this and this is like their baby. It is like their very precious first thing, and the idea that like you would start pointing out the flaws in it can be really rough for folks. compliment sandwich is like the golden rule and tool that we use all the time with new designers of, again, both theater and board game world, where it's sort of like, you want to be like, okay, this is great, and here is the thing that I love about it, and then the big glaring flaw that I actually want to talk about. We're going to focus on that for a little bit. But like seriously, you're doing a good job, and let me assure you that these are the things that are working. And so it's like this sort of idea that you are giving them like foundational pillars to say like, this is really useful and really good, and like the core idea of what I'm seeing here and what is like what you should be building upon and expanding. But then I like to sneak in the garbage thing that they have to put directly in the dumpster.
Yeah, my friend described that as he does I like and then I wish. So he'll do I like and then tell them what he likes about it, and then he'll say I wish, and then, which is a little bit different.
It's a lot gentler.
It's a lot gentler, yeah.
than what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish is a really good way to go about it. And I think
Patrick's like, I wish this didn't suck. No.
Straight up, I have like said that.
I mean, I think tone has a certain effect on the kind of feedback that you give and receive. But the I wish approach is, I think, something that I definitely use, because it's also important to gauge kind of like what kind of feedback the person is specifically looking for. Like, I remember with Someone Has Died, like that there was a point where I was just like taking any feedback I could get because I was really anxious and wanted the game to be as good as it could be, and I didn't have a clear vision yet. And then when I got to the point where I started receiving feedback that was like, oh, I understand why you're saying this, that's not my game.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, okay, like this is feedback, I can take this as feedback even though I'm not going to incorporate it into my thing. Which it's like totally valid feedback, but not for my game, you know?
Yeah.
So most of my career I've been in very male-dominated industries. So I've been told many times, if you can't take it, you shouldn't be here when people give me feedback. Can I just take a moment to say, no, that's not okay. So what's really important for me when I give feedback is to be kind. And that doesn't mean to be nice. It means to be kind. So if your game is not working, it's not kind for me to say, hey, this is great, because what that does is that sets you up for someone else to shred your game. And you were like on this high because someone said your game was nice, and then the next person is honest and you die a little. So I think it's really important to be kind. So what we call a shit sandwich, sorry if swearing is a problem, but is basically...
This is streaming to children all over the world. No,
okay, well, so hi kids.
Shit sandwich is.
Shit sandwiches are putting the bad thing between good things. That is one way of doing it. I've had several I wish style feedback sessions, and they have made me feel much better. So I think it's really important, first of all, what is useful about what you're saying to this person? Secondly, have you actually understood what they're trying to achieve, and find that out before you tell them what you think of it, because if you want it to be this, and they've told you they want it to be this is nice. Tell us what you're interested in, but then please pay attention to what they're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, I have two other granular things also to add to giving feedback. One is, again, like I said, I blank a lot on how to give feedback, and so sometimes I just directly ask the creator, like, what are you looking for feedback on here, so that I can sort of focus what I'm telling them, because sometimes they just want feedback on like one specific thing, not on like stuff in general. And the other thing is, I like to take notes during playtests, because interrupting the playtest is it's sort of difficult, because when people are running playtests, they're trying to also like gauge sometimes how long their game is. So if you're like constantly interrupting them to give them feedback, that's not great, because it's sort of messing up the like natural flow of the game. So I like to take notes and then sort of do it all at the end. Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the bigger issues that I've run into in terms of like game design, and like when we were first getting started, was figuring out who we can go to actually for like reliable and useful feedback. your family and friends are like excellent people to run playtests with and just put in hours and put in rounds of the game to start figuring out how things feel to you and what stuff looks like to you. They are the worst people for getting feedback. Like half the time they're just like, yeah, it's great. And I was like, well, that doesn't tell me anything. Like I need you to like tell me what's not working. Like it's all wonderful. I'm like,
I love you. This is great.
That was a very different response.
But you know what I mean. Like they're people who love you, so they're like, I love you, this is great. And you're like, no, but I need you to tell me what's not working. Yeah, but I love you, so it's always working. You're wonderful.
No, and it was fantastic when we finally started seeking out like playtest groups. Like I'm in New York City, and like if you're in any kind of metro area at all, there are like absolutely meetup groups and things. You just gotta like find out where they're hiding, essentially. But like we went down to one of those groups pretty early on in the process, and they were like, and this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad. I was like, fantastic. And I just remember like sitting on the floor and like literally just tearing up pieces of the game, be like, okay, that's stupid, it doesn't work anymore, so let's get rid of that. And like we were looking for that like really harsh feedback. But to your point, I mean, there's also times where I don't want you to like try and undo the foundation of the game. Like sometimes I'm like, well, I only care about like what the visibility reading of symbols looks like at this point. So like that's all I want to talk about. So it's important as both a feedback giver and receiver to communicate as you are sitting down, essentially, what it is that you are looking to talk about or looking to address in this session. That's not to say other things can't come up, but like, it's great to set those goals at the beginning.
Yeah, like if your game doesn't have any art and you tell everybody like, hey, this isn't final art, and somebody's like, this looks like crap, you're like, that's not.
Yeah, but can we move past the art?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I just want to address the word that you said, harsh. No. We don't need to be harsh. We can be like, we can say something's really not working. That's okay, but we don't need to say it sucks. Like, being honest is good, but what you may not know is that, as Bronnie says, that person has a whole day to have. So you don't need to ruin that day just because you want to say this sucks. Like, there's another word. There's another way of expressing that. You don't have to hurt the person to tell them that they need to fix something about their game. So I'd really love if harsh wasn't something that came into people's feedback.
Sure, I definitely want to agree with your vocabulary on that. I have a as a straight white guy in the room, my vocabulary constantly needs some updating, and so like that, like harsh is not the right word for what I'm looking for. Critical, I suppose, is what I'm looking for, where it was like I was looking for somebody who was going to start like being like, none of these pieces work, please get rid of them, they're terrible for what you're trying to do.
And I know that's what you meant, but I just wanted to make sure that we clarify it.
I want to say I'm appreciating it, thank you.
Hey, see what just happened? That!
Good feedback.
We want to see that.
It's very sexy.
I mean, you're welcome.
So let's talk about accepting feedback. This is another thing that can be difficult because, as we've talked about, some people can be straight up mean, and you don't have to tolerate abuse. That's not what this is about. So likewise, we'll talk about our experiences accepting feedback and some advice. One thing for me is that, and I think a lot of people can vibe with this, is that accepting feedback can be difficult, and also you sort of want to, there's like a knee-jerk reaction sometimes when people are giving you feedback to be like, well, this is why I didn't do this, or no, you don't understand, I already tried that. I just write down everything they say, and if it's not useful to me, I just say thank you, and then I move on to the next person, because the problem with sort of arguing with people or explaining to people that you're probably never going to see again why something is in your game isn't the way that they want it, it's eating up into valuable feedback time that you could be getting from other people. So I just sort of write it all down and then throw out what I don't want to use.
That takes so much discipline.
Oh yeah, like I said, I've been doing this for over a decade, and for the first few years that was not how I took feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel similarly when I was talking about kind of like getting to the point of like, oh, I know what I'm trying to do, and so this is not useful to me, like took a while. So like until getting to that point, there's such a temptation of like, oh, but what if this could happen? Oh, what if this could happen?
Well, and I think it's also tough because there are a lot of events like Unpub at Metatopia and other professional playtesting events where you're often playing with other game designers, and other game designers absolutely want to tell you how to fix your game because the whole time they're thinking about how they would make that game, or like the decisions that they would make. Redesign, yeah, and they can be very I don't know if aggressive, confident that their way is
aggressive,
correct.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, playtesting events like that can be great because you are going to get people who are like, they're just a playtester, they're not game designers, they're just people who love playing games, and their feedback can be incredibly valuable. And other game designers can also give you valuable feedback, but sometimes we are just so in it that, we don't know how to sort of divorce ourselves and like figure out a more critical and constructive way to deliver that feedback.
I think one of the things that I find really important when I'm preparing to receive for feedback is I've done a lot of sales. So what I do is I step out of the creator place and I move into the this isn't mine place. So what I'm doing is, I don't know if anyone here has ever worked in sales or where you're having to deal with complaints about something you had nothing to do with. Raise your hand. Anyone know what that feels like? And you know how sometimes you kind of take it personally, but also like you don't really care? If you can find that place about your own game, it makes it so much easier to survive feedback, especially if they're coming at you hard. And so I tend to want to be there. And the problem is sometimes people don't give you time to get to that place. So something happened to me a while ago. I had said, I'm really tired. I'm not actually ready to do any more feedback on this right now. I need a break. And this person who had played my game earlier on really wanted to tell me what he thought of it. And I'm like, no, I can't right now. And he bailed me out and he had so much to say. And it was all stuff where I had clearly said to him, this is not relevant. I know these are problems. I don't want to talk about these. Can we talk about this out of the stuff? And he just went on and on about the other stuff. And I cried because I wasn't able to step back. Please remember you're dealing with a person.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was at a convention where you were already like completely exhausted.
Yeah, it was like midnight.
Yeah.
I'm like, son, can we not? And he's like, but I have to tell you what's wrong. And I'm like, no, but I know though. I know that needs fixing. Please no.
Sure. I think a lot of this communication stuff too comes from this. I am terrible at this part of receiving. I am so excited to justify all the reasons that I have done things to you, and will waste all of my like feedback playtest time telling you why I did the things that I did because I won't stop talking. I will suck up all the air in the room. But the thing about it is one of the tricks is learning. Reading between the lines, I guess is the right word for it, but to figure out what it is that they're saying, right? So like a lot of times feedback that is given to you will sort of be like, it's like, I don't like the way the red piece moves, and so you should change that from a 2 to a 3. And like, there's a trick in doing game design and learning that like, you shouldn't be taking the literal thing that they're saying because they're not the game designer and they don't really know all the pieces, they don't know what's going on, and you also don't need to explain to them why you don't need to take those pieces. What you do need to do is recognize what it is that they are feeling that is the problem.
Ask them why they want to do that.
Yeah.
One of the most infuriating things to me in game design is being like, but I did the math and the numbers are correct. And they're like, yes, but it feels like this. And it's like, well, but...
You're like, I don't care about your feelings.
Often,
this is my
I don't care if you enjoy my game.
Oftentimes, in balancing your project is actually more important to making it feel correct.
I think I don't care if you enjoy my game is such a... I mean, I'm not kidding. My business partner, we were making this game called Tank Robbers, and he was so obsessed with, like, he made these incredible tanks that were like cardboard, and he made like the turret piece, and the turret part moves, and it looks like a toy, and people would lose their minds when they saw these, and all they wanted to do was move the tanks, shoot each other, blow each other up, knock down buildings, and he was like, no, the game is about getting gold, and I want you to get gold. And after like a year of like taking it to every convention we could, getting tons of feedback, playtesting it all the time, he just kept coming back to me and being like, how can we make people want to get gold? And like, we got a publisher, and the publisher was like, absolutely lost his mind, freaking out about the tanks, and was like going like, vroom, vroom, like one, and like signed it. And I finally had somebody on my side because we sat down with Anthony and we were just like, hey bud, what if we took the thing that people thought was fun and we did that?
You're totally right. I also want to disagree with you so badly.
Do it, please do it. Please do it. Suck up all the air in the room.
I love doing that. No, because I think that at a certain point, I mean, I talked to a lot about my students and folks that I talked to about game design about like defining success and what success is and is it monetary success, is not. Everything you're saying makes perfect sense from like so many standpoints of like finding an audience and selling the game. But also like if you are just designing the game and that's the reason you want to be doing this, like I think that you get to pick hills to die on.
Absolutely.
And like if like the reason you are making the game is because you want the tanks to pick up gold, like yeah, that can be like your hill to die on. Like I have this conversation I have with my students all the time because I will have students that like hyper focus on set design and like this idea that they will go hard in the paint on like some weird, totally innocuous piece of the set where like I will be doing like a week's worth of notes on a door. And it's sort of like, well, is this a show about a door? And it's like an honest question to them, right? Like, if, like in this case, like, is this a game about tanks picking up gold? And if the answer is yes, then that's the way it's going to be. And sure, we can work on that if that's what you want and if that's how you want to define the success of your game. If the end of the game, for example, is just like your friends sitting around in the living room and playing with it, great, go nuts.
Right.
If your goal is mass market, maybe you need to start figuring out how to move in that other direction.
If your goal is I would like to sell this game to human beings, then you should listen to what the human beings are saying about the game.
I think one of the things I've found most interesting in my design journey is going from, I'm sure this game is basically ready, to putting it in front of people I don't know and finding out that actually it's not one, it's not the game I think it is, and two, not ready. And now most of my games, I basically go, it's 80% ready, which means that I've got 100% of the work left. Because I'm here, I know what it should be, I've got my vision, I've got my feeling for it, and because this is how I work, I've got all the illustrations. Don't do that. If you're paying for it, don't do that. I draw my own. Don't pay for people to do it, especially when it's 80% ready. I think something that is really hard to understand if you're new to game design is that your game is going to change so much that when you look at your initial creation and then you find out what ended up being born, they have often no DNA in common. And it's personally one of the things I enjoy the most. Is being like, this started as this thing and now it's that.
It's fun to like take a picture of like all the different and then like put them all together and see them all in one place, yeah.
Yeah. That being said though, I designed a game earlier this week and illustrated it and made a quick prototype to bring here thinking I'd have a little bit of time to play with some friends and see what the rules are. But Unpub didn't end up having as many bookings as we expected. And so last night I was just sort of sitting there playing with it and I was like, I think these might be the rules, that's cool. And then some people walked in and they're like, we have no game to play. And I was like, okay.
You do now.
Put it in front of them like, no one has played this game. I have not even played this game. Would you like to try? And it worked. And then we had no space, like, we had spaces, we had no one to play today. And I was like, shall I just put it out there? And people played it, and like I got all this feedback like, yeah, you just need a few more cards. And I was like, I know, I only made this many because I was just doing a minimum viable prototype. And they're like, yeah, we need some more of this. And I'm like, Other than that, I love the game. And I'm like, huh? So yeah, Pelicanary coming to Kickstarter next week. Maybe the week after.
Hey, listen, you just email me and we'll work it out.
Cool, love that.
I think another important thing is also what's called blind playtesting, which is where you put your game in front of a bunch of people and give them the rules, and you do not you just leave them alone, and you try not to interject. You don't give them any rules corrections, and you see how they interpret the rules, and you see what is like the ways that, yes,
that's literally what happened to Pelicanary today. Yeah. I just gave it to I taught her the game, and then I left. I have played the game 1.5 times. It has been played 6 times. I wasn't even there, so it's ready, right?
For sure, yeah. 6.5 times is definitely.
It's more playtest than some games.
Hey, it's pretty development.
Unfortunately, that's probably true.
Yeah,
But,
we should actually address how much you should play test a game too. I think that's
sure, yeah. A lot.
6 times.
Many times.
Minimum 6.
Many hours. I mean, the problem for me with playtesting and designing a game is that even when the game is on a store shelf, I'm like, that game isn't done.
No, but it never is. That's the secret.
Like you just decide
That's the secret,
that
not finished.
Yeah, you just
publish.
decide when you don't want to work on it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's normally the point that it goes out. I had some folks come by the booth today to be like, did you notice some things about this game? I'm like, yeah, probably, but I mean, I printed it, so.
You were like, please don't.
Not here.
Yeah.
Did you know you have a typo? No. That's how that word is spelt in the world of this game.
On our last game, we had somebody find a typo. Literally, as I was selling the last printed copy of the game.
That was in status
But
report,
that makes this edition special.
The game
Like, it's
was
worth
out,
so much
the
more
game
than...
was out for years, so we didn't know we had spelled a word wrong. I can't remember what word it was. I thought I was going to die. Anyway.
One last thing about the blind playtesting that I was saying is that one thing when you're playtesting, even when you're just doing regular playtesting, is to just see what's intuitive to the players. So you might have set up like a mechanic one way and just see that people are repeatedly doing it another way. And I think that for me, that's usually time to like revisit that mechanic, see why they're doing it that way. If it's important for it to be the way that I want it, figure out if I can make it more intuitive for them, or like figure out a way to like make it clearer to them that that's happening. And if not, figure out a way to work in how they're doing it to make it make sense.
So, like, just to bring this back to Pelicano, because actually it's a really good example. I didn't bother telling them one of the rules that I was considering, and I just watched them, and at the end of the game it didn't work, and it was a placement rule. And I said, how do you think you should have to place these tiles so that this doesn't happen?
That's a great
And they were like, oh, I think you always have to do this, so you have to have this many sides touching. And I'm like, yes, exactly, that's what I was going to say, I love that. And then the other thing that I also hadn't explained was when you run out of cards of this value, you start being able to use the higher value ones. And they were like, hey, look, you weren't there to ask, but we just decided to do this. Was that okay? And I'm like, yes, those were the rules. So, you know, coming to Kickstarter in 2 weeks. Don't do this. Please don't believe me.
Definitely asking playtesters, like, especially if you're stuck on something, being like, well, how do you think? Like, what feels best for you? Like, that's a great way to get.
That's what I offer. People go, how does this work? And I say, what do you think it should do? That's really interesting. Have you done that?
Not verbatim, I don't think, but I definitely relate to the thought of like seeing how someone responds to something as being the feedback in itself. Like, it's not that they're answering a question or anything, but I know with the project I'm working on now, we kind of tried to present like automated movement it's like a co-op game where you're playing against the game, and so we had to figure out how to present automated movement, and we tried so many different ways where we were just like making shapes and no one could follow the path correctly. And it's like, okay, so our brain does not communicate the way your brain was, so we need to find a way to like spell this out in a way that like anybody can.
I think those are called desire paths. Desire paths. So you know how like on the corner of a road, if like on a street corner, you might have a bit of grass, and you see that there's a track through there because that's where everyone's actually walked, even though they're supposed to walk on the path around that. That's a desire path. And so when you watch how people behave, that tells you what the instinctive way of using it is. And so if you watch them play that game and you see what the instinctive way that they do it, that's their desire path for your game.
Yeah.
I've got to credit Sen Fung Lim for teaching me that. That's not me. And if I got it wrong, Sen, I'm sorry.
We ran into that in our first game. We had this visual thing. There was like a rock, paper, scissors system in the game where like one thing would play on another thing.
Was this for Complicated Board Game?
This is for Complicated Board Game, the card game, which I can't do the spiel anymore. But no matter what we did, it was like an even split down the middle where half of people will read this wheel as going one way and half of people will read it as the other. And thankfully this game was dumb and I could do whatever I wanted because I just put in cards that would make it do the opposite thing, and then everybody was wrong.
Pat, did you check by any chance if that correlated to left-handed and right-handedness?
Oh my god, no.
Because I was testing something with BubbleNet, And I told people every second, place one every second thing, and I didn't tell them where to start. And I just watched. And all the right-handers did it one way, and all the left-handers did it another way. And I was like...
You're blowing my mind right now. I'm actually like so interested if this has been a mystery that has like plagued me and lived in the back of my head for years.
Well, you see, I have a pet left-hander.
Thank you, George, for your service. Something that I talk about often with people as well about feedback is even if you get a bunch of feedback that you think is good, do not implement all of it at once, because that is not a great way to figure out what is working and what isn't working.
No, change everything instantly all the time.
Listen, we had a guy who, in one of the playtesting groups I was in, he had a game that was a D30 roll and move. So you could move one up from, yes, that's how, imagine playing it.
So I rolled a 1, but you rolled a 30.
Yeah, later, dude, I'm out.
What's
your
the catch-up
token's
mechanic?
down the hall.
Yeah, I'm playing a different game.
Yeah.
But we gave him so much feedback, and when he came back the next time, it was literally every single piece of feedback we had given him, and it was a disaster. Like, it worked even less than it had worked the first time. But yeah, my business partner, again, poor Anthony, we had this co-op game called Kobolds, and we would like start testing it, and he refused to write any rules down, so I was always like, he'd be like, can you run this? And I'd be like, absolutely not. All of the rules are in your brain, and you make changes that you don't tell me. So he would make like 2 or 3 changes and do them all at the same time, and I would be like, we don't know which of these things is working because you changed too many things. So you have to sort of like, I hate to be like, you have to have like a more scientific approach, but you know, it's, if you just do one thing, which is hard if your game takes an hour to play. But
I'm sorry, can I just clarify? Are you saying that you should write down the changes so that your design partner can know what the changes are instead of just putting it in front of them and saying, run this game?
I don't like that. I think I'm fundamentally opposed to that.
Because, sorry, George, for the number of times I have not done that. Here, there have been
George,
changes.
sorry for all
what they are.
Sorry for all the microaggressions that you're experiencing. We can start a support group. George and I are
doing it to him.
Yeah, we're going to start a support group. Me and George.
This whole panel is anti-left-handed.
It's a hate crime against
He's filming this.
George, blink once if you are in danger.
You can't see. With your breath.
I can't see anything, I'm sorry.
And we don't care. I'm really good at giving nice, friendly feedback. Everything's fine. We're all safe.
Oh no, we were just talking about implementing too many things at once into a game.
Talking about implementing too many things at once. When you are sorting through feedback, just to be an adult now and bring this back to what we're supposed to talk about, one of the things I personally think is really important is to actually look at which things you're hearing a lot. And even if those things are things that you don't feel make any sense, pay attention to the fact that you're hearing them a lot. So for example, if you're hearing something, the same thing over and over, that means that people want to reinvent your game into this, it may not make sense for this game, but it could be something. I did that recently. I had a game where I wanted it to be this, but people kept saying these things, and it's turned into another game. There's a lot of useful stuff in that other feedback. Don't try and cram it into this one. It could be this one. It is now. That one's called Moles.
Coming to Kickstarter in 3 weeks.
4. I need enough time to finish.
No,
Pelicanary.
ridiculous. 4 weeks.
We're allowed. Are we allowed them at the same time?
Absolutely not. I'm so sorry to tell you this, but no.
Okay, so they'll each be 1 week campaigns, back to back. This is fine, right?
So getting back on topic though, the way that I feel so rude saying that. No, the way I like to deal with this though is I pick ideas that I think are like pillars in the game. I think I've said that a couple of times already, basically. But like, I try and identify and name like immovable pieces. They're not always immovable, but like for when I am doing playtest feedback kind of a thing, where it's like as people bring me pieces, especially if it has to do with just like minorly adjusting like the prices of a card or something weird like that. what I will do is I will sit down with the people that I'm developing the game with and be like, okay, but like this is the thing that doesn't move. Like no matter what, like for the moment, we're going to try and balance everything around this. And then, you know, if we get to the point that we have to like swipe away everything else, like we can take a look at that. But like one thing that can help you in this process, at least 90% of the time, is to say like, let's identify a couple of things that never move, and then we can move all the pieces around that as we get the feedback. Because if every time you are sitting down with a prototype, it is a completely different game because you're moving so many of the pieces and you're accepting so much of the feedback, you're just going to end up spinning your wheels. You're never actually going to start moving the project in the correct direction.
Incremental.
Yeah.
That's a word for you.
I'll just add to that that sometimes, I think having a core concept that you're building around is very helpful. And I think, I think that often, like A, you'll have to move that concept eventually, and then B, sometimes that it's more amorphous than what you originally intended, where like you might think that that your core concept is like, this is a game about trading, but then actually you realize it's a game about like people interacting with each other, and then that it becomes like broader in a way that kind of like, or just to stay open to like larger changes.
I think a lot of this comes down back to this. There's this like debate that I've heard a million times that I think is meaningless in the board game world, where it's like, are you like a mechanics first designer or a theme first designer? I think a lot of the time you'll hear people be like, you have to have a mechanic first, and that isn't the way that I work whatsoever. And like we ran into this a lot with our last game, Co-op, which was like on paper it's about assembling furniture, but like pretty quickly on we realized that like the puzzle that's actually happening there, the pieces fitting together, is completely unimportant. It's entirely about this like communication, like breakup relationship joke aspect that's happening in the background. And that game was like way more about like the theme and the way something feels than it is about necessarily the mechanics.
Vision. I tend to rather than, I liked your concept of pillars, but one of the things that I tend to think about is what's my vision for the game? And generally for me, it's how it should feel when I'm playing it. And that sounds super nebulous, and it's very, very unmeasurable, which is strange because my real job is as a business analyst, and it's all about deliverables and measurables, and that's probably why I'm like this about games. It's not measurable whether or not this lines up with my vision, but it is also. Does this feel right or not? And so I often ask people, how does it feel if I change this when they're giving me feedback? So they'll say, oh, I really don't like the red thing. I want it to move 3 instead of 2. And I go, okay, but how would it feel if I moved 3? And they're going, oh, that means you've moved 3. Oh no, I wanted to move 3, but now I have to understand if I can move 3, you can move 3. That's not how I want this to feel actually. And I'm like, see, so that's what I'm trying to do with the game. I don't want it to feel like that for you, which is why you don't get to do 3 as well. And that often helps me get the feedback I actually need, rather than just saying, no, the maths, because they don't care. Who cares about the maths? Okay, fine. Well, you're wrong. It is important, but does it feel right?
We have a little over 20 minutes left, and I definitely want to have some time for Q&A. Does anybody else have anything else you want to add?
The one thing that I want to add is I always have one question that I ask people when I give feedback, and I'm wondering, when I ask for feedback, and I was wondering, do you all have a question that you always ask at a playtest too?
I love player interaction. I love games that aren't just everybody's playing solitaire. So that's one of the things that I often pay attention to, but I don't always ask that question because I know that some games are just going to be 4-player solitaire. So I sort of like, that's the one that I sort of keep like in the chamber. If I don't have anything else, if I'm like out of ideas to ask, that's the one that's like my favorite one to like talk about.
I think the only one I could think of that like I probably ask every single time is like, how did it feel lengthwise? Because and maybe sometimes I don't ask because I'm there and I know. I can feel that it's long and I don't need to hear them tell me that. But, and that again comes from more of just like a feeling perspective of like, were you engaged for the length of time that we were sitting and doing this?
No, I would actually say I don't have a question that I ask every time, because every one of my projects I've tried to do something kind of weirdly different. I've cared about doing something totally different, and so like I have had a static question that comes up with each of those games that like sticks with it throughout the whole playtest that I will ask in my little spreadsheet thing that I do at the end, but not something that goes into all of my games.
Sorry, did you mean about giving feedback? Because that was what mine was.
Oh, when I ask people for feedback about my game.
That's okay. I did it the wrong way. I did it
How
the
dare
opposite
you?
way. For getting feedback, I definitely feel the same way Pat does, because all my games have been very different, so it's hard to have one question.
My question is, if you were describing this to a friend, what would you say?
Oh, I like that.
That's a good one.
It works really well. I put it on all the feedback forms for Unpub. And the feedback, so what we're doing with Unpub is we're asking people to come, play test a game, give the feedback in person, and then fill out this little form, and they get a little ticket in exchange for it, and they can use that ticket to buy some of the prize games that we've got. There may or may not still be some left. But on the little feedback form, the last thing I say is, please write on the back of this form how you would describe the game to a friend. And that has proven to be super useful, because some people are like, oh yeah, it's like a trick-taking game, and other people are like, oh yeah, it's this like really pretty game about, and so when you get all of that cumulatively, you start to see how people actually perceive your game, and then you understand whether that's true or not, and you can use that for checking it against your vision, you can use it for marketing, you can use it for taglines, you can use it for what you write on the back of the box, you can use it for how you explain the rules. So that's why I use it for every single game, and you're welcome to use it too.
Thank you.
If it's not clear, I think that you should all use Unpub as a resource. I know personally none of my games would have ever gotten to nearly as much of the level as they were. If Unpub is great, and it probably has a chapter somewhere within a reachable distance to you, so you should look into it.
Well, the last thing I was going to say before Q&A was I feel like Unpub is a big one. There's also Protospiel. If you're on the East Coast, in my opinion, the best one is Metatopia. That one is incredibly targeted feedback. It's a great event. And cardboardedison.com is a great resource. They have a list of, I don't know if they've been maintaining it, but during quarantine, they had a list of all of the online playtesting groups.
I don't think they've been maintaining it.
I was about to say was that a lot of the groups that you just listed have active Discord servers that are still doing their thing, and you can still do digital playtesting and stuff. It's not as as populous as it was during the height of the pandemic stuff.
Yeah, Protospiel has a Protospiel online, so it's very good.
And if you're not a big Discord fan, there are groups in like Facebook and things like that as well. So join us.
One of us. Great. So does anybody have any questions? Does that microphone, is there an adult?
I see a question over
there.
there.
Is there an adult? Does that microphone work over there? Yeah? Okay, great. If you have a question, please. Hello.
Maybe. Yes.
Oh, I thought he had a question.
Just checking it.
Thank you so much.
Person with question. Or you can just say it.
You're close enough, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you talked earlier about being able to step out of like the game creator role when receiving feedback. For moments when you are in the game creator role, what is some advice any of you have about being able to prompt good feedback for people that, like when you are playtesting that are more in their shell, more reserved, and clearly have good things to say but don't know how to put the pieces together? Like, what can you do to sort of push that environment to be like a safe space?
So let's just repeat that for everyone.
Thank you, Kat.
So what we're talking about here is, I was saying that for me what helps is to step out of being the creator and step back from it, and what are other ways that people can do that if it's not easy for them to step out of that situation. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want me to answer it first?
Oh, please do, yeah.
So I actually practice, because I take things super personally, like super personally. I know that most of you probably can't tell that from the stories I've told. But no, I will lie awake at night going, I don't think that person liked me. And we just passed each other in the street. You know what I mean? So it's a form of self-hypnosis. You have to practice. You have to teach yourself, how do I get there? And that's why that particular person approaching me when I said I was done was particularly hard for me, because I hadn't hypnotized myself into the, okay, this is going to be fine zone.
You're extra
and
vulnerable.
It sucks. Yeah. So I also used to do martial arts, and before I went in the ring, one of the things I did was I always played a particular song. It is Get in the Ring by Guns N' Roses. And so I go from being like, yep, cool, whatever, to, come on. And find something that gives you that space. It doesn't have to be a whole song. You're probably not going to have time to play a whole song before someone goes from playing your game to giving you feedback on your game. But you can teach yourself how to find that switch. And you have to practice, and it's going to suck at first, and it's not going to work at first. It's like all the things. But keep doing it, and also tell people like, I haven't done this before, please be nice, give me time to learn. Like, you know, you can say that. It's actually fine.
I saw a great meme the other day that was like, when somebody says to me, don't take it personally, like the best I can give you is I'm going to take it extra personally. One good way also to get into that zone of like hyping yourself up is tell somebody you really care about that you have imposter syndrome, and they will just absolutely self-esteem street team send you, tell you the nicest things, then you'll be like, yeah, I'm amazing.
In fact, actually, yeah, good point. You can actually write a little message to yourself on your hand or other things like that. Just look at that right before the feedback starts. Like, even just like, I am fucking awesome. It doesn't even matter if you believe it. Just say it out loud and then be like, all right, come on. I'm ready now.
I don't know that I have much to add.
Adie's like, no notes.
I over-prepare.
That's not acceptable.
I over-prepare for things when I get anxious about stuff, and so like this is how I both get other people to give me the feedback that I'm looking for, and also how like I make sure that I'm like fine in the space kind of a thing. And so for all of my stuff, like I have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets upon spreadsheets for all of my games, basically, with like all of the individual pieces I'm tracking and the cards and stuff like that. And there's a page in every document that is just devoted to feedback forms that I write up in advance. And it's like the questions that I want to ask them directly and the things that I want them. And like ideally, I am grouping those questions in a way such that like I'm sort of helping them guide their thoughts a little bit, where it's like, hey, here's an issue that I'm looking at. How does it make you feel about this? Like, are there any other weird things that are doing this that I'm not thinking of? And that can like help people try to figure it out. And it helps if not all of them are long form questions. If you can give them 1 to 5 numbered stuff, that's really great, because like after like 2 long form questions, people will stop writing answers because they get sleepy. So
you're basically saying find out what makes you feel safe, and prepare for it before you're under attack. Yeah.
I end up, I'm like very empathetic, so I really watch the players when they're playtesting my game, and if somebody looks like they are straight up not having a good time and they're not saying anything, it could be just because they're introverted, but it could be because, so I usually am like, hey, I noticed it doesn't seem like you're having a good time. Like, can you like tell me why? And that will sometimes they'll just be like, oh no, it's not that, it's that, you know, I'm uncomfortable. Yeah, but other times they'll be like, yeah, I did not care for this game, or this game was not for me. And
oh, we haven't mentioned that. You can stop a playtest anytime. You don't have to play the whole game.
You should.
In fact, if it looks like people are like, stop it. Stop the playtest, find out what's going on.
The minute you feel like you have identified a thing that isn't working, it's totally cool to just pull the plug on it and just like reset or whatever, move on to the next thing.
Yeah. And that's off topic, but also not. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to add, just to bounce off of that it's also okay for the feedback to be like, this game is not for me. I don't think that came up.
And they can just go. And it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I used to, I totally understand that is valid. However, like...
However, you have to say you have to play my game and you must look.
No.
Finish the whole thing.
I have forced myself to get out of my comfort zone. Like, there are definitely games that are not for me, and I have sort of like, I just sort of forced myself to play them because I want people who the game is not meant for are absolutely crucial, because they are going to give you feedback that nobody else is going to give you, because other people who have played that type of game, there's going to be things that they're overlooking. So I don't know. I think those
it's incredibly valuable also.
But if they don't want to be there,
if they don't want to be there, let them go. But yeah. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, that's okay. So I'm a writer, and from a writer's standpoint, I was told when giving feedback, the best way to do it is list all of the issues you have, choose 3 that are the most instructive and productive, give those back, and then if the other issues that you are hoping the person can correct on their own come back again, then you point them out. My question is, what happens when you are asked for feedback, but the person who asked for feedback doesn't really want it?
Oh, incredibly common. So common.
It never happens to me because my games are already finished anyway.
I mean, you subtweet them. I don't. I mean, I've definitely had that situation. Like at Metatopia, there was a guy who was very famous and he came to show his game and he was absolutely just not accepting any critical feedback. Like, we were like trying to give him actual feedback and he was packing the game up and going, and we were just like, I mean, you can pretend like you're writing it down. Like, so those situations are difficult because it's a waste of your time and it's super disrespectful.
So disrespectful.
And like, I don't know what to say other than never play test that person's game again. Like, just never give them, like don't give them your time. Like, if people ask you about them, just say, I did not have a good experience with that person. I will no longer be participating in their play. You know what I mean? Like,
respect your time.
That's been, yeah, don't waste your, like, that's been my experience with it. Cool.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I would agree, and just add that, like, you can tell that person to find a recording of a panel called How to Give and Accept Feedback or something, because, like, I think it's the same thing of, like, you can't help a person that doesn't want to be helped, right? It's kind of a lost cause, so, like, either they can figure out how to give and accept feedback, or they can be unpleasant and then lose their helpers.
One thing I would add to that, depending on how you're feeling, you could call them out on it. Hi, yeah, so I've played this game with you and I'm trying to give you some feedback that I would really like to give to you because I feel like I want your game to succeed, but I'm not sure if you're actually that interested in receiving feedback. Is that what's happening? And most people go, oh shit, that's not what I meant to say. That's not how I was, oh, I'm so sorry. And if they don't correct, then cool, yeah, okay, well, hey, so thanks so much, I'm off.
Thank you very much. I don't have anybody like that in my life now, but previously and in the future.
Thank you. Tell me who they are and I'll subtweet them.
First of all, thank you guys so much for all the feedback all the instructions on feedback you've given. It's been really helpful. I am in a place where I do happen to have a community around a game I am designing and playtesting, and I am wondering about how to actually create a way to get the feedback back. Do you have advice on whether one-on-one forums, group sessions where I get on a Discord call and ask for feedback? Are there like what specific ways can you facilitate getting that feedback?
Protospiel Online. Try Protospiel Online as the next one's in January. But that is a super cool way of doing it because they have all of the systems all set up around it. My husband, George, over here, does our online side of things because I can't handle screens for board games. I play offline deliberately. But that is a super, super cool way of building that network, getting that feedback, and it's regular, so people are expecting you to come back in, and there'll be people who come back to see how your game has progressed, so they're looking for you, and they're all over the world, so you get all kinds of feedback.
Sorry, just to clarify a little bit, so are you looking to expand your network, or are you looking for the infrastructure for how to collect the network you already have?
The infrastructure would be great, but
Sorry.
I would love to look into Protospiel. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
They give you a whole bunch of extra.
Yeah, a whole bunch of
have a look
groups,
at their website.
A whole bunch of these groups like Unpub and stuff, like if you went down to the Unpub room right now, I'm sure that they have examples of feedback forms that you could take a look at.
We do also have open tables.
And the answer to all the things that you listed, I think, is yes. There are different values from face-to-face feedback, but also like making like a Google spreadsheet. Like Nicole has been a playtester of mine where I had like sent a blind copy of the game to them and been like, and here's a link to a spreadsheet afterwards and just like fill it out when you're done. So like I think yes to all of it, and ideally you'll be looking at all of it with your project. Like
Get emails.
Get emails.
Emails are gold.
Google Forms are also awesome
say.
if everybody's like spread out in digital, then sending them a Google Form. But it's also important to be careful with like questions that you're like are very open-ended. Those might be better for like a one-on-one.
Yeah, doing a form or a survey is also like a great opportunity to really hone in on the specific thing that you're asking for, because it can be like specific to this element of the game. What did you think? Specific. You can break it down as much as you need.
If you're asking for specific tools, JotForm, SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, there are a bunch of things like that that are free. And just make sure that when you get all of those data that you're using them. So find out what it is you need to know and put that in there and then use it.
Also, just to throw one more thing on top of this, I really love recording my playtests at least once in the process, because when I go back and watch those videos or try to figure out how something worked or didn't work, it's really great to be able to see that. And that's doubly so if you're working with a team, because then you can send specific examples of what you're talking about to people.
Photographic notes are really good too. What was the end state of every game?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
How do you, I guess this is for everybody, how do you feel about framing feedback as a question to whoever you're trying to give it to?
How do you go about framing feedback as a question? Was that what you
Yeah, how do you feel about it?
How do you feel about it? Like as a tactic?
I think it's pretty good, especially, I think it depends on the creator, because sometimes if the creator is like we were saying, if they're like maybe not open to direct feedback, you could ask them like, well, you know, why do you do it like this instead of this? Or, you know, I think that can sometimes feel a little safer if you're worried about hurting somebody's feelings.
As long as you pay careful attention to your tone, because often that can sound worse. Why did you do that? Why did you do that?
A D once more. No notes. Oh, thank you.
Nothing in the group.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Well, no, I think it's a great way also to like start the conversation, right? If the person that if you're playtesting someone else's work and they're not, you can't get a read on them of like what stage the project is at, and what they want. Like you can ask, and then you find out what kind of feedback they're looking for if they didn't take the initiative.
That's a really good point, because also like if you're wondering, oh, am I going to upset you by giving you this feedback? It's really useful to go, I know that you mentioned this, but do you want feedback about this? Because then you find out whether that, you know, like, so I know you mentioned that the art's not final, but do you want feedback about the way that you've laid out your cards?
Right.
And then if they don't give it. Just don't.
And even the question like, what stage of development do you think this is in?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you guys so much for doing this panel. This has been really awesome. I was wondering if any of you had experience or some advice for running playtests and collecting feedback for longer form games. Like you mentioned earlier in the panel, of games that are going to take maybe more than 1 or 2 hours to do a full sort of playtest. Any advice for that kind of a game?
Yes, Patrick.
Yeah. I've been doing that for a while now for some contract projects that I'm working on. It's rough. It's hard to be like I think it's a reason a lot of people do shorter format games. I like shorter format games. That's why my stuff tends to be that. But like also like this idea of like, hey, I'm gonna try making games for the first time. Hey, best friend, will you like sit down with me for 4 hours in my living room and play this game? And they're gonna be like, no. They're gonna like tell you to. Anyway, it's tricky. A lot of it, I think, is advanced planning, and like I have literally started a regularly meeting group at this point that is just like 30 folks that I know that when I'm working on this project that I'm just like pinging all of them. I have like, you know, a dozen events going at the same time in Google Calendars. I'm checking with people. It's a lot of just like the logistics of getting people into the space. I found that to be the hardest part. In terms of collecting the feedback, this is specifically the project that I was thinking of when I said that like video feedback is huge, because folks, or like taking recordings, excuse me, of your playtests are important, because we will play these projects for more like an hour plus basically, and then I can get notes from people, but they don't have time to give me all of the things that they literally thought about or did during the game. And then so then being able to go back and look through that video stuff and reference it as I am sending off my notes to the rest of the team has been super, super, super helpful. And then a lot of it just comes back to the way that I like to do things, which is just being hyper prepared. Like having all of these questions put out, like this is like a multi-hour, more than 1 hour board game that I'm working on that has like factions and things like that. And so like being able to just break down, literally I have feedback forms for the individual factions that folks are playing so that I can hand these things off to them and be like, what did you think about this specific stuff that I'm looking at with this group as opposed to others, because I know it's going to be at least another week before I can get people to sit down and play this thing again.
So having not done the things I'm about to list, my advice is manage expectations. Be completely prepared. Understand what their commitments are before they're there. If they have agreed to be there for a long amount of time, make sure that you compensate them for that in an appropriate way. So either offer to pay them, offer to feed them, make sure they understand what's going on. So my era was my first ever playtest. I invited people to join me. I hired space at a game store. I arranged for there to be food. They did not know that they were coming for 4 or more hours. They didn't understand that's what I meant, and I just thought that that's what they knew.
Do you want to go, Adi?
No, I actually had a question off of that for you guys. I don't know if have any of you worked on like any like legacy stuff? Like that's what came to mind when you asked that question. I don't know if that's the context you're in.
No, but Kobold, our game Kobolds is like, it's like a 2-hour game. And the way that we handled it was we had one of us was running the game and the other one was just taking notes. So that was the best way that we could do it. We are actually at time, but we would love to hear your question outside to the last person. Thank you for your question. Thank you all for your questions and for being such a great audience. This was amazing.
Actually, just say your question. I just want to hear I think everyone wants to hear what your question is, and then we'll answer it outside.
I'll go really quick. It might not even be a thing that you guys have experienced before, but if we're going about playtesting and accepting feedback, what would you do if you are under NDA contract with your certain board game and can't really give it out because you're using certain IPs and stuff like that? How do you go about getting playtesting about that, because you can't necessarily fully show everything, but you still need to actually...
You have to get sorry, Jesus, I thought it was on.
You have NDAs.
You can definitely get the playtesters to sign NDAs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really quick question, so that's a quick answer. NDAs.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I did a panel and people liked it.
This is like their baby.
Then you should listen to what the human beings are saying.
How did it feel lengthwise?
Don't do this. Please don't believe me.